On the 17th of July, 1997, 400 shops across the United States were told they were finished. They were the last of them. Inside each one, there was a long counter with round stools bolted to the floor, where for decades, people had sat down for a coffee and a sandwich in the middle of a shopping trip. There were bins of hair clips and sewing needles and Christmas decorations. There were staff who had worked there for 30 years, and customers who had first come in as children with a nickel in their hand. Within weeks, the doors closed on all of it, and the oldest chain store in America was gone from American streets. That is where almost every version of this story stops. It is not where the company stopped. It did not go bankrupt. It was not broken up and sold for parts. It did not miss a single day of trading on the New York Stock Exchange. 11 months after it shut every Woolworth in America, the F.W. Woolworth Company simply changed its name, and it kept going for another 27 years. If you have walked past a shop selling sneakers in a shopping mall in the last decade, there is a very good chance you walked past it. So this is not a story about a company that died. It is a story about a company that built the exact thing that would destroy it, watched that thing work, and then shut its own version down in order to protect a name it would eventually delete anyway. By the end of this, you will see the precise decision that did it, and the year it was made, 1962. To understand that decision, you have to go back to a failure. In 1879, a farmer's son from upstate New York, named Frank Winfield Woolworth, was working behind the counter of a dry goods store in Watertown. He was not a natural salesman. He was awkward with customers, and he had already been told he was not much good at it. But he had noticed something at a table in that shop where everything was priced at 5 cents. People behaved differently around that table. They did not have to ask what anything cost, and they did not have to haggle. They just picked things up. On the 22nd of February, 1879, with credit borrowed from his old boss, William Moore, he opened his own store in Utica, New York, and called it Woolworth's Great 5-Cent Store. It failed. Within 3 months, it was shut. He earned just enough to pay Moore back, took the sign down off the wall, and carried it with him. On the 21st of June, that same year, he hung the same sign above a different door in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. That one worked. And the reason it worked was not the price. It was the counter. In 1879, in almost every shop in America, the goods were kept behind the counter. You told a clerk what you wanted, and the clerk fetched it and told you the price, and then you argued about it. Woolworth put the merchandise out in the open, on tables, at a price printed in advance, and let ordinary people pick it up with their own hands. He had turned shopping into something you could do without permission. The second store paid for a third. Frank put his brother Charles in charge of one, and then a friend in charge of another. And instead of building a single company, he built something stranger. A ring of shops run by different men under their own names, all buying stock together through Frank, all laid out the same way inside. He called them friendly rivals. They spread through Pennsylvania and New York and into Canada, and by 1912, there were 6 separate chains that were really one machine. That year, they stopped pretending and merged. The new F.W. Woolworth Company opened for business with 596 stores in 37 states, and in June of 1912, it listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Frank Woolworth then did something that tells you exactly how he saw himself. He commissioned a skyscraper in Lower Manhattan. His own investment advisors were against it, so he paid for it himself, $13.5 million in cash out of the dividends on his own shares. It opened in 1913 at 792 feet, and it was the tallest building in the world for the next 17 years. People called it the Cathedral of Commerce. A man who could not sell had built the tallest thing on earth out of the profit on items that cost 5 cents. He died 6 years later, in April 1919, of blood poisoning from an infected tooth, at 66 years old, in his mansion on Long Island. His company was only getting started. What Woolworth had really invented was not a shop, it was a template, cheap manufactured goods, priced in advance, laid out to be touched, in a building on the busiest corner of a town center. It was copied everywhere, and 5 and 10 cent stores became a fixture of every American downtown for the next 50 years. In 1932, the company added a 20-cent line of goods, and by November 1935, the directors dropped price limits altogether. The store had outgrown its own name. And then there were the lunch counters. They started in the British stores and came back across the Atlantic, and they turned a shop into somewhere you stayed. A long counter, stools, a coffee, a sandwich, half the town passing through in a day. Which is why, on the 1st of February 1960, 4 black students from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University sat down at the whites-only lunch counter in the Woolworth in Greensboro, North Carolina, and asked to be served. They were refused. They stayed. What followed was 6 months of sit-ins and boycotts, and a turning point in the American civil rights movement. In 1993, a section of that counter, 8 feet of it, was taken to the Smithsonian, and the building itself is now a civil rights museum. By then, the company was the most successful retailer in the world. In 1979, its 100th year, the Guinness Book of World Records listed it as the largest department store chain on Earth. It had also, 17 years earlier, already made the decision that would end it. 1962 is one of the strangest years in the history of retail. In that single year, 4 different companies looked at the same country and came to the same conclusion. Americans were moving out of the town centers. They were buying cars and houses with driveways, and they were not going to walk to a small shop on a main street anymore. They were going to drive to a big one with a car park. So in 1962, the S.S. Kresge Company opened the first Kmart. Dayton's opened the first Target. A man in Arkansas named Sam Walton opened the first Wal-Mart. And on the 6th of June 1962, in Columbus, Ohio, the F.W. Woolworth Company opened the first Woolco. Understand what that means. Woolworth did not miss the future. Woolworth was not slow, or blind, or asleep. It saw exactly what Sam Walton saw in exactly the same year. And it had more money, more suppliers, more buying power, and more experience than any of them. It built the big discount store with the car park at the same time they did. The problem was what it was carrying. Kmart, Target, and Wal-Mart were starting from nothing. Woolworth was starting from thousands of small shops on the main streets. Those car parks were about to empty out. Every customer Woolco won from a town center was a customer Woolworth lost. This is the part of the story that almost never gets told, so stay with me, because what happened next is not what you would expect. For 20 years, the company ran both, the old 5 and dimes on the main streets, and Woolco out by the highway. And in the same period, it did something else that nobody paid much attention to. On the 31st of August, 1963, it bought a shoe company, the G.R. Kinney Corporation, and ran it as a subsidiary. Kinney started opening specialist shops, and on the 12th of September 1974, it opened one of them in the Puente Hills Mall in California, aimed at people who bought athletic shoes. They called it Foot Locker. Nobody at head office thought that was the important news that decade. Then came the choice. In 1982, the British side of the business was cut loose as a separate company, which is why the Woolworths on British high streets outlived the American ones by 12 years. And on the 24th of September 1982, the company announced that every Woolco in the United States would close. They shut in 1983. Read that again. In 1983, F.W. Woolworth shut down its big discount stores with the car parks and kept its small variety stores on the emptying main streets open. It closed the future and it kept the past. Kmart, Target, and Wal-Mart, which had opened in the same year with the same idea and none of the advantages, were left to divide up the market on their own. The Canadian Woolco stores survived a little longer until 1994, when the company sold most of them to Wal-Mart and handed its old rival the keys to Canada. What followed was 15 years of a company looking for something to be. Through the 1980s, it scattered itself across dozens of small specialist chains in shopping malls, jewelry, and accessories. Winter coats, cut-price medicines, sports goods. By 1989, the plan was to hold 10 separate stores in every major mall in the country, so that if one concept failed, it could be swapped for another overnight. It never got there, because it never found 10 concepts that worked. On the 15th of October 1993, it closed half of its remaining 800 general stores in the United States in a single restructuring. The stores that were left were old, on streets where the traffic had gone, selling things that supermarkets now stocked at lower prices. And then came 1997. On the 30th of January, the company bought East Bay, a mail-order business selling athletic gear. 6 weeks later, on the 17th of March, Woolworth was removed from the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the list of 30 companies chosen to represent the American economy. It had been on that list since 1924. The company brought in to replace it was Wal-Mart, the store that had opened in 1962, in the same year, and with the same idea, took its seat. 4 months after that, on the 17th of July 1997, the 400 remaining American Woolworth stores were told to close. Here is where it gets strange. Losing your name is normally what happens to a company after it dies. This company did it on purpose, and it did it while it was still solvent. On the 12th of June, 1998, the F.W. Woolworth Company legally renamed itself the Venator Group. Venator is Latin. It means hunter or sportsman. 11 days later, on the 23rd of June, Venator sold the Woolworth building. The tower Frank Woolworth had paid for in cash in 1913 went to a New York property investor for $155 million, and the company that built it shrank from 25 floors inside it down to 8, and then to 4, and then moved out. And on the 20th of October 2001, it changed its name one last time. It sold off everything that was not sport, and it took the name of the most successful thing it owned. A shoe shop concept from 1974, born out of a subsidiary it had bought in 1963, almost as an afterthought. It became Foot Locker, not a spin-off, not a buyer. Foot Locker is the legal continuation of the F.W. Woolworth Company. It kept the share price history from before 1997 unbroken. In 2012, when it marked 100 years on the New York Stock Exchange, the company put out a picture of a Woolworth store from 1912 next to a Foot Locker from 2012 and told everyone they were the same company. Because they were. So what actually killed Woolworth? Not the internet, which arrived far too late to matter. Not a failure to see what was coming, because it saw it in 1962 and built it that same year. What killed Woolworth was that it owned too much of the world it had already won. Every one of those Main Street stores was an argument against the car park, and the company could not attack itself hard enough. So in 1983, it made the safe decision, and the safe decision was to protect the thing that was already dying. Kmart and Target and Wal-Mart were not smarter, they were emptier. They had nothing worth defending. And the piece of the company that survived was the piece nobody was defending either. A shoe subsidiary that no one at head office was watching closely enough to protect from change. There is a last date. On the 8th of September 2025, Dick's Sporting Goods completed its purchase of Foot Locker for $2.4 billion. That was the end. Not in 1997, when the shops closed and everyone wrote the obituary, but on a Monday in 2025, 146 years after a failed store in Utica, when the company that Frank Woolworth incorporated finally stopped being a company of its own. It outlived its own name by 27 years, and almost nobody noticed it was still there. If you got something out of this one, subscribe, because we take apart a different fallen empire every week on this channel. And the pattern that killed Woolworth shows up again and again in companies you would never expect. And tell me this in the comments. Do you remember a Woolworth or a store like it in the town where you grew up? What was in it? I read all of them.